All right, welcome back to Kettle Additions. I'm Austin McElroy. I'm the master brewer and co-founder of Cabin Boys Brewery. And today, I've got David McLain here, who is my head brewer in our facility. And reluctantly, I have him sequestered recording a podcast with me.
I don't know how you achieve this, to be honest with you. I hide in dark corners so that you don't ask me to come on these things. But this time I found myself in a bright room with bright lights and a beer, so I'm not that mad.
There we go. Hey, well, cheers to that. Thanks for
Cheers.
coming on. I know how much I wouldn't say dislike them. You just don't want to come to them non-prepared, which you are very non-prepared today, which is great because for the listeners out there, you're going to hear the rawest form of David McLain that you're going to hear.
You know me very well. That is exactly right. And I apologize on the front end of this podcast to all of you wonderful listeners, those of you I know, those of you I don't know, those of you I will know. Cheers and good luck.
So forewarning, there might be a little bit of laughter and some awkward silence in this podcast. But why I wanted to bring David on was to talk about liquid efficiencies in the movement of a manufacturing brewery, because what we do is always thought of as this romantic thing of making beer and then serving it in a glass, and the back end of it is not necessarily thought of as something that's super important. So I guess kind of framework for me, David, why on let's say a 10,000 foot level of why it's important to think about how important it is to not lose liquid within a brewery.
Yeah. Yeah, that's a great question.
I know it's really broad. We're going to bring it. We're going to bring it to a pinch point of like we're going to do a little bit more of a deep dive into all of the affluency of what's going on in all of our decisions. Yeah. But I just want, from your perspective, when we talk about efficiencies, what does that mean?
You're a risky son of a gun to give me a broad question.
I know.
Yeah, so loss of liquid means a lot of things. One of them being that all of our hard work in production goes down the drain at some level. There's inherent loss in any brewery, and that's a fact. But the greater volume loss when you are taking beer on a brew day and then moving it to a fermentation vessel and then moving it to a packaging tank and then into its packaged format and then into wherever it's being served and then into a glass. Like at the end of the day, whatever goes down the drain is hard work that we've done and also something that this business is paid for. And to lose that is... well, it hurts a little bit. And I've been a bartender before too. I've been at every level in production here. And I've been a customer for longer than any of those things. So I feel like it's interesting to see that hit home now from the chair I sit in as head brewer here at Cabin Boys. And that's been a learning experience for me as well, understanding the importance of loss at every aspect of that journey, and the potential that could be coming out of every point of that process.
Okay, so that's awesome.
Yeah, I could have. We could
go down and down and down that rabbit hole, but that's really good because so that was a very 10,000 foot level, like acknowledging that there is some sort of loss at all pinch points of production. I remember you and I sitting down and doing calculations 2 years ago on our, let's say, efficiency quest that really it was more or less about how do we get a finished amount of beer that we want to in the packaged product without turning the brew house on so many more times.
Mm-hmm.
Talk about what you guys did in the back to accomplish what we were trying to achieve and what that meant in, well, I could say achieve that in recipe development, in brew house efficiencies. What was the main thing in your guys' mind to accomplish the efficiencies that we were trying to achieve?
Yeah. Well, my main thing was you gave us a number, and it was we need to have no more than 5% loss. And so that was the forefront of my mind was, all right, well, we've got to hit this number we've been given because this is important.
And
It,
okay, so to that standpoint, you say 5% loss. To the breweries out there that might be listening to that, that seems like a very unachievable number.
yeah, definitely.
So keep going.
Yeah, and oh man, I wish I had. I'm the kind of guy that needs like all my notes in front of me to be accurate, and so my memory's not as good as it. Well, my memory's never been good, so that's okay. But yeah, 5% loss, and that was particularly, I think, in from bright tank to packaging. And we had another lost conversation and what our expectations were from our brew house to fermenter to bright tank. And we're still gathering a lot of data on all this in order to tighten up our loss right now. But initially, the earliest conversation was, how do we get as close as possible to when we turn on our 10-barrel brew house, oversized 10,
Right.
how do we get as close as possible to 10 barrels in the bright tank?
Right.
And so what does it look like to turn on our 10-barrel system? And if we're filling up a 20-barrel tank, how do we get as close as possible to 20 barrels? And so we got to play with finding our original gravity, and then where we wanted to take our recipes and how we utilize our ingredients on that brew day in order to achieve exactly those numbers. And so dialing into those things 2 years ago, starting that conversation, and that conversation doesn't end.
Right.
But starting those conversations 2 years ago, yeah, that was the framework I think we were looking through. How do we make that volume of liquid that we're trying to make?
And if you could remember, I can answer this question for you, but just for the listeners out there, why was that important for every single time turning on the brew house, getting 10 barrels or more into the packaging tank? What was the frame of mind in that goal?
I can't remember your exact numbers because you had exact numbers and exact dollar amounts in mind. So honestly, I think you'd be more eloquent on this than me.
Well, I'm not going to answer my own question. Well,
but I might appreciate that. But we definitely, at the end of the day, if let's take Castellan Kolsch, for example, this is one of our best-selling beers. It's probably both of our favorite hats that we've ever owned. You're currently
100%.
sporting the OG Castellan Kolsch blue hat with the red thread. and it's got the sweat marks that have just come with time, like the rings on a tree.
I just sent this through the wash.
Oh, really? I was actually looking at it thinking, man, this kind of looks like it's still in 2020. Like, how's it so clean?
I just sent it through the wash.
Great hat. I almost wore mine today, but I wore my other hat. That's similar. Anyway, so thinking about Kolsch, that particular beer, we were able with our efficiencies to go from getting, we often put it in a 30 barrel tank. So that's how I'm going to talk about it. You can tell me to talk about that differently if I need to. And again, for those of you who are listening that don't know what a beer barrel is, that's a unit of measurement for liquid. There are 31 US gallons in a beer barrel. I'm going to let you do that math on your own moving forward in this conversation. So keep a calculator nearby if you need one. But so we often put our cast iron Kolsch in a 30 barrel fermenter. And so we turn our 10 barrel brew house on 3 times, and send it in. But we were yielding 27, 28 barrels, per time we filled up that fermenter. And now, beginning 2 years ago, we began to see yields of 32, 33 barrels within our after we moved from fermenter to bright tank. 33 barrels in bright tank is a packaging tank, so what we package off of. So we're turning on our 10 barrel system and turning on 3 times and getting an extremely high yield out of that. Again, it's important to know it's an oversized 10, and that's partially how we're able to do that. But with that, I can't remember how many times we were turning over Kolsch in 2020, but right now it's, this is where I don't have my notes, but we'll say 22 times or so. So brewing 220 barrels. I know that's low actually, but I can't.
It's
think
probably
of the number
closer
in my
to
head.
30.
So well then, yeah, let's say 30. I mean, and if every time if we turn it over 30 times and get 2 extra barrels every one of those 30 times, you just do the math. Well, like that is not only an efficiency of liquid, it's an efficiency of our work day and our man hours, as you often say. And it just helps every aspect of what we're doing in production be more efficient. Now, that's our greatest yield beer. Like that one is...
But still on that, so if you do the math, why this was such an important part of what was an efficiency calculation, let's say efficiency of time, not even efficiency of liquid.
Mm-hmm.
But the reason that you guys are so good at what you do is because when you took that to heart and regained the 2 or 3 barrels that we were losing on every turn, 30 times 2 is 60. So that's 6 turns of the brew house strictly for Kolsch, which means 1 week of work just for that beer that was eradicated from the schedule.
And this goes into conversations we're currently having. Not only that, but we have to fill that tank.
Right.
So many less times. And so our cellar becomes more efficient. And we have the ability to brew more beer within our particular amount of vessels.
Correct. So yeah, you do that calculation just on the math in my head. If we have 5 constant year-round beers, and we're turning those over pretty consistently, not much more one than the other, you take that 5 times 60, that's 300, that's 30, and if you efficiently do that, then you've eradicated a month's worth of man hours on the brew vessel or the brew house, which also eradicates an entire month's worth of multiple tanks out of fermentation time. So it increases your amount of space to produce new liquid if you're in a growing state.
Mm-hmm.
So talk about how was that accomplished, and then talk about how much ingredients were saved within the last 2 years.
Oh man,
Because
I wish I had that exact number.
well, I
That'd
mean,
be fun.
we don't have that exact number,
I
but
should. I can. We have the data. Um, yeah. So as we did that, man, and to think about it, big picture is so interesting, and I wish I would have prepared. But today, instead of preparing, we brewed a new spring seasonal that's coming out. I don't even know that we've talked about this yet with the growing public, and maybe this isn't the time to do it.
you can talk about it,
We
because
do a little teaser.
yeah,
maybe?
a little teaser.
Little teaser. So we've got a number of beers that we have in distribution regularly. And then we've got seasonal drops. And this spring, we're releasing, for the first time in distribution, a Cabin Boys Pale Ale, Outfitters Pale Ale.
Woo!
And oh my gosh, it looks gorgeous.
It does
was
look gorgeous.
beautiful. Through that sight glass, watching it move from the brew house to fermentation vessel 4 was just a glorious thing to behold. It was beautiful. But anyway, I did that instead of thinking about these numbers today. And I'm happy I did. It was fun. So yeah, as we were doing the tangible work of figuring out how to, man, I don't even think I can do the math on the fly of what ingredients we saved, but through essentially, I don't know how specific you want me to get here on this, but
You can go as deep as you want.
cool. So
This is the technical side of the podcast. So fill the brains with as much
I
information
feel like I
as
need
they want.
a master's degree in this to be on this podcast, to be honest with you. It's just shoot me over to Siebel Dumans and I'll come back and be prepared to talk about this. But at the moment, you get this, David. So yeah, when we were thinking about trying to meet those efficiencies, essentially you introduced us to a technique called high gravity brewing, which essentially you take your recipe and you reach for a higher gravity. And by when I'm talking about gravity, for those of you who don't know, it's just a unit of measurement for fermentable sugars within beer or liquid. It's not always beer. You can measure gravity before you put yeast. But anyway, so that can either be in degrees Plato or specific gravity. And we talk in degrees Plato, and I've never used specific gravity, so come at me.
It's okay that we do. So specific gravity and specific gravity. Did I just say the same thing twice? No, Plato and specific gravity are talking about a percentage of sugar content within a liquid. It's the buoyancy of the liquid that shows the sugar content. And so when you say Plato, and most breweries use Plato because we don't necessarily need to get as exact as specific gravity. There are some countries out there that want that exact specific gravity because they have tighter ramifications of alcohol content.
Mm-hmm.
So specific gravity is technically more accurate. Plato is accurate up to the 100th or the 100th degree of gravity. So you're splitting hairs if you want to go from specific to Plato. So keep going.
But if whoever's out there, if you want to
But
split
whoever's
hairs,
out, yeah.
go split hairs. But if you ever work at Cowboys, we use degrees Play-Doh.
And if you ever work at a production facility, you're more than likely going to work in Play-Doh.
All right. I sent us down that tangent.
That's okay.
So, high gravity brewing. So essentially, we take our particular recipes that were, let's say, meeting 13.7 degrees Play-Doh, and we find a way to, through ingredients, get a higher gravity than that. And then on the hot side, on a brew day, after the boil, add a water to reduce that solution. Add water to reduce that gravity down to that desired gravity again that our recipe meets. And you can do that through a number of ways. It's like high gravity brewing is mostly done by using sugar additions post boil. As far as I know, so that feels right.
You can high gravity brewing. You can do high gravity brewing in the mash tun with more malt. You can do high gravity brewing within sugar additions in the boil kettle. It just depends on your mouthfeel, what you want within your recipe, the efficiency of the ingredient, the cost of the ingredient.
So that's what really hits home for us right now. Dextrose is extremely. It's like, give or take twice the price we're paying for our malt right now.
Right.
And so
we might go down a different route.
Yeah. I mean, and so as we developed these recipes 2 years ago, we definitely understood that, and 2 years ago, the price of dextrose wasn't that high, but there's a point at which you utilize both. And every weapon in your arsenal you bring forward to help achieve your goal. And so there are beers that we did high gravity brew more so with dextrose additions and water, and there are beers that were more of a base malt addition. Like we high gravity brew a lot more with dextrose in our quad. We high gravity brew with a higher ratio of base malt in Trail Magic. So
it's just really it's really what the recipe calls for.
Yeah.
However, we're going to get more sugar to get a higher gravity within the boil kettle before dilution.
Yeah, and it's all ending up being a pretty small percentage of the gravity at the end of the day.
Usually one Play-Doh or two.
Yeah.
At max.
Yeah, and these beers are usually between 14 and 19 degrees Play-Doh OG. So small amount.
Yeah. So when we're high gravity brewing, the reason that we're doing that is let me help your train of thought come into, because when we dilute that liquid within the boil kettle, and we dilute within the boil kettle because we don't have deaerated water. If we had deaerated water, we would be diluting at packaging, but that's not feasible within our space, nor is it conducive to the cost of the equipment to do that. But when we're introducing 180 degree water into a boil kettle, we can dilute that liquid efficiently and accurately before it goes into the fermentation vessel.
Totally. Did I make a comment earlier that mostly it's done
in the boil kettle?
Yeah. Thank you for bringing that home. Kudos to all of you who can pay for deaerated water.
Yeah, not us.
Not us. Man, yeah, that's fun.
Wouldn't it be nice?
Wouldn't it be nice? But man, I really would like to do the numbers on that ingredient move that saved, the
Well, I could do
barrel amounts, and then
I could do something on the fly while you talk about the movement from the boil kettle to the fermentation and this, that, and the other of how we've curated a good bright tank amount or a bright tank fill.
A bright tank fill. Well, number one, it sounds like you're asking me to talk about how the cellar sings to you in the early mornings before the sun rises.
Sure,
but maybe that's just the romantic in me.
You could
wanted to hear
whatever path that you want to go down, David.
Man. Yeah. I don't know. What are you thinking in addition to what we've said about filling bright tanks? I think what I'd like to say is it's been really cool as a production worker to see how our efforts within that first year and up until the present, how our efforts, because it took a while to dial that in, how our efforts have come to fruition, and now we're seeing consistency in that. And so as we move that liquid from our kettle to our fermentation vessels into our bright tanks, and we're watching that sight glass fill, like every transfer is exciting. Every transfer now from a fermenter to a bright tank, except for the ones that aren't, are very exciting. We get to see our efforts next to a number and watch that, watch us be successful. You get to see success in real time. And that's really cool. That's been really fun to see.
Yeah, because when you fill the boil kettle consistently on a consistent basis, and the consequence of that, which was not based on a demand of consistency of Play-Doh, but we've actually seen a more accurate amount of our executed desired gravities within the fermentation vessels become a tighter controlled portion of our production.
Mm-hmm.
So we don't have these massive swings of like, well, Trial Magic needs to be at help me out, I haven't brewed 15.4 or something like that.
Depends on what yeast strain you're using.
Yeah. Well, we're not going to go down that route, but like if your Play-Doh that you're shooting for is 15, 2 or 2.5 years ago, we would have been fine with 14.5 Play-Doh to come out, or 16 Play-Doh.
Yeah.
So you're also wasting. That's an unquantifiable amount of ingredients that you're saving, but you're getting a more accurate alcohol percentage within your finished product every single time when you have a control of dilution to the specific gravity that you want.
Yeah.
But the quick calculation on my part was we're saving in between 10 to 13. Well, it's probably more than this, but on our year-round beers, we're saving around 12 metric tons of malt, of base malt, per year.
Yeah.
Which is close to 25,000 pounds of grain, which is on our side saving $12,500 worth of malt.
Yep.
That doesn't have to be used on just 5 brands.
Yeah.
And then if you want to put it on the opposite side, we're able to efficiently sell all of those 500 barrels that we saved, and gain. So you're saving ingredient cost and then gaining profitability on top of it. So it's a twofold conversation.
Yeah.
So what have you guys? So we've talked very heavily on the front end of efficiency and the importance of it, because one, I mean, you can go down a whole different rabbit hole of um, efficiencies, saving the planet
Yeah.
of that amount of grain not needed to be planted.
Yeah.
Because 12 metric tons is usually 10 to 12 acres worth of malt.
Yeah. Is that really?
I'm pretty sure. Well, I could be very much corrected, but
yeah,
it's not.
That's a fun metric though to know.
Yeah.
Oh, I want to know so much more about what we're talking about.
But so it goes much further of like water efficiency and energy efficiency. So you can go down a whole different rabbit hole of, our brewery really trying to think about the earth and its constant struggle to be earth.
Yeah. To maintain
that earth.
identity.
Yeah.
We really want the earth to continue being earth.
Yeah. But it also saves our pocketbook and being able to efficiently turn on and save our time. Because I would argue, what is... so go into a little bit of a fun aspect of the efficiency change. What has this done for the brewer's life?
Yeah. Man, I don't even know how to quantify that. But we are able to utilize our trained brewers in so many other ways that I just feel like we have a less demanding schedule to meet the same volume. And then as we grow, it's growth and effort at a scale that's achievable instead of just having to lace up and sprint and tell your wife you'll be home when you can. It's just a bit more of an achievable goal, and that sounds a little. There's not a lot of hard data on that sentence.
Sure. Well, I've seen the brewers leave at 3 or 4 more consistently than 6 and 7.
Yeah, and there's more that goes into that, and we can talk about the efficiencies of a new canning line as well.
And we're getting there. We're gonna get there.
So yeah, there's definitely more than one tributary flowing into this. Are they tributaries flowing into a big river? Or are they tributaries flowing away from a river?
We'll say into a river.
We don't know.
I think a tributary goes into it.
I think it goes away.
It may.
I have no idea.
I'm not a geologist.
We need a river expert.
Yeah.
So, if any of you out there are river experts, find a way. There's got to be some 21st century way to tell you, Austin McElroy, host of Kettle Additions, what this is. Let us know.
Let us know.
You can send us a letter. Send me a letter at 1717 East 7th Street.
Delivered by a pigeon.
Man, that would be the coolest thing.
David's old school.
Yeah. There are windows that we can open for your courier pigeon. Let us know.
Yeah.
Oh man.
So downstream,
yeah.
You just said something that's super important and something that we really had a calculated decision on of how are we going to reduce waste on the downstream, which downstream means post-fermentation in the brewery space. So downstream on the packaging line, what does that mean for efficiencies and how did we accomplish what our goal was?
Yeah. Is that a question?
Yeah. So it was more like describe what our mindset was of how we were going to achieve the less than 5% loss on the packaging side of things once it went into the bright tank and then once it went into the can or the keg.
Yeah. Man, I kind of need I need a history lesson on this at some level. It's been a second since I've
Should we share a beer and talk about our history that we've gone through?
Maybe. Yeah. Maybe we need to send a text to the the people front of house and find a beer. This is Austin talked about awkward pauses.
It's okay.
We're there. We're in it.
David has his hands laced behind his back or the back of his head, thinking, looking up at the wall.
Yeah.
Thinking about all of the things that he has had to do on the packaging line to get to where we are. Because I will say this, while you're thinking about that, we shot 2 years ago, we shot for the moon.
Yeah.
Because we knew that it was accomplishable.
Yeah. And
what we went for usually is absurd.
Yeah.
In a brewery space. And if you would talk to anybody about efficiency of liquid going from brew house to packaging to be less than a quantifiable, let's call it 10% loss, would laugh you out of the room in the craft beer space, because we don't have a lot of equipment to get that accomplished.
Right.
So speak into the methodology of our mindset once beer goes from the bright tank to the packaging line and how we get that accomplished.
Man, there's so much to say. But I think one reality is once we were given that number, there was incentive to, and almost like pride in self and pride in work, incentive to try and figure out and problem solve on a packaging day. Particularly on canning days, when something was going wrong, and I may be going totally down the wrong rabbit hole.
No, you're good.
Of what we're actually talking about. But I feel like
you're getting a philosophical.
Oh man,
philosophical with this answer, and I like it
usually
because you're taking it to left field. If I'm speaking David, I'm going to left field, and then it's going to curl around to home plate.
Man,
and it's going to land.
Do we know why the base runner went to left field? No,
we don't know.
No, but is he going to make it home? We hope so. I feel like on a canning run, as a canning line operator, you've got, and you run into a problem. You've got two ways of thinking. You can think either I've got to get this thing done and working, and the only way to do it is to push product and incrementally fix it.
Correct.
Or pause, stop the machine, wait a minute, evaluate, and think. And those two tensions are real because they're both valuable ways of approaching the problem. You know you've only got X amount of time in a day to work. You know that if whatever's happening, if you don't figure out the problem, it wrecks everybody's week. And so there are pressures there. But also, if you keep the machine running, there's only one thing that's happening. Whatever that liquid is going down the drain. And I think one thing that we were able to do is take a step back, take a deep breath, don't get stressed in the middle of a canning run, and begin to slowly evaluate, like, okay, what's going on here? Can we call our tech support at Twin Monkeys? Shout out, guys. Y'all are great. Probably never going to listen to this, but
they could sponsor this podcast and I would be happy.
I'm all about it.
Yeah.
Frank, we called you today. You killed it.
Right on.
But that is one thing that you don't often think about training. Just being able to stop the machine for a second, use the brain God gave you, because we've got some really smart guys here, and the brewing industry is full of smart, passionate people. So taking a second to evaluate what the problem is, what you already know, and bring all that into a moment, before you turn the line back on, is extremely important. So I feel like 2 years ago, as we started talking about this, we began to see the value in that. And that in and of itself, I think probably really got us close to our number, almost, I mean, in tandem with our liquid movement into bright tanks, and having that cushion on the front end anyway.
And on the back end, to go off of that, the easy thing is just keep product moving and get the job done there. But on the back end, you're ruining the next month, because if you have 4 canning runs that have the same issue in a week, you've just poured 10 barrels of beer down the drain just to keep the line running.
Yep.
And then you have to add in another brew day to the next week.
Totally.
So what I'm hearing you say is, like, if you pause for 30 minutes, think about it constructively, yeah, it might make that day less efficient, but you may have prevented 2 or 3 more canning runs having the same issue, and then not pouring an entire batch down the drain over a week's worth of time.
Yeah. Or however, yeah.
And preventing another, let's call it 17 hours of work for another batch to go through all of production.
Totally. Yeah. And I think it was fun. Not that we did that on a regular basis by any means. We're actually really proud of our canning line operators. We've had 2 canning lines, both of them twin monkeys, both we've loved. That 3-fill head Yampa will always have my heart.
It pushed out a lot of beer.
So much! Way more than a 3-fill head probably normally has the capability to do. At least annually. I mean, those 3-fill head Yampas can put out.
They can crank.
Yeah, the Twin Monkeys technician came in one day, and I was like, we've got 800,000 cans through this. He was like, I've seen more. I was like, oh, come on, man, I'm proud. So they can handle a lot, but I am so glad that we upgraded to our 4-fill head with the volume of cans that we're putting out. It makes a lot of sense. And so that also, having the right piece of equipment for the volume that you need to put out, assessing that and being able to pull the trigger on that is extremely helpful in regard to efficiencies, in regard to man hours and things like that. So I kind of just pivoted there, but
that's okay. Yeah. So bringing it all around, on the decisions that we made of learning to pause when you need to, because if you didn't pause, I know that you say this, but if you didn't pause and fix the issue in the moment, you would have that issue the next time that you turn on the canning line, and then it would just profusely get worse.
Oh yeah. Yeah.
So what we saw is fix it in the moment, pause, don't waste more product than you need to, and turn it back on so that you can move within your week.
Yeah, definitely. The worst situation on a canning line, what I'm going to say is not at all the worst situation, but a really annoying situation is when you've thought that you've solved the problem, and you get 3 more cases in, and it comes back up. You're like, no. If I just do this one other thing, it's gonna be better. And you go down that road, and then you've got 10 cases that you've lost, which at the end of the day, 10 cases isn't the worst thing every brewery has ever seen. Right. But we all want no loss.
Right.
But that situation where you find yourself just like, oh no, incrementally, I've got this. Like, I know what I'm doing. I've got this. And then it pops back up. That's tough.
It's tough. It's rough.
Tough. But that's a part of just honing your own skills and recognizing what the problem might actually be, taking a step back, and then turning the machine off for a minute, and then coming back to it with a clear mind is extremely important.
Yep. Yeah, so after all of our efforts, because we've been 2 years into this journey, and it's wild. I think I said this when we sat down. I was like, I think that this may be more. I think that we can accomplish our goals, on a regular basis within 12 to 18 months. And then I was like, we'll be in a rhythm within 2 years. That's a really hard mental game to play. Where are we now with our efficiencies of how we think about grain, liquid going into a boil kettle, and then going into fermentation, bright, packaging, because of the efforts of how we think of the liquid movement and being conscious of every effort. Where are we standing now? I know that you know these numbers because you just went through them.
Yeah.
And I know where our numbers were back then.
Yeah.
And I want to hear what our numbers are now, and how we're accomplishing them, and where we want to take them in the future.
I do wish I had my laptop in front of me, but our packaging loss is on average like a tenth and a half above 5%.
That is,
if I'm awesome. Right, I think it's at 5.19 through 2023. I don't remember off the cuff, and I should, our efficiencies with turning our 10-barrel system over into our bright tank yield. But it's on an Excel spreadsheet on my laptop.
I think I know what it is, and it's 1.9% efficiency loss.
It's right in there. 1.9% is freaking great. I sent you that document. Right?
Yeah. I'm the numbers guy.
Yeah, you are. Good
it's okay.
Yeah. I'll wax.
But before all of this effort, to the listener out there thinking about, you don't necessarily just have to think about, because just think about the liquid that you're losing, because every brewery is going to lose liquid.
Oh, yeah.
And the way that we, like, you and I sat down and thought about liquid in a completely different way than I could say that I was taught in school, but I don't necessarily if it was necessarily designed this way in the book. But we were having almost, let's call it, in between 15 and 30% loss from brew house to fermentation vessel back in the day, which means if we were making 1,000 barrels, then or turning the brew house on 100 times, we were only making 700 barrels of beer.
And that was just a norm. That was acceptable.
That was a normal, acceptable thing. And then when we now turn on the brew house for 100 times, we are producing in the bright tank 995 barrels of beer. So we're only losing 5 barrels of potential beer going into the bright tank.
Yeah.
Because of the efforts that you were talking about of high gravity brewing, thinking about ingredients, how do we get to that standpoint of finished product and consistency of gravity. And then from transfer from bright tank to packaging, we were sitting at around 20% loss. So we've, through the small increment things that you guys have accomplished in the back and designed, has really reduced our loss from, let's call it, close to 30% loss down to below, on an average of all liquid, below 10%, very much on a normal basis.
Yeah.
Which is incredible. And what I would want the listeners to hear is, manufacturing beer is, one, a passion to make it taste really good, but two, you have to be passionate about how you're treating the liquid and not destroying it in the process to create a final product.
Yeah. Yeah. It's really fun to see our stacks of cases after a canning run now, because they don't really exist.
You mean our low fills or our wasted amount of cases?
Exactly.
I knew what you were saying.
I needed that further explanation.
Yeah.
It really feels good.
Which is kind of a bummer for, our employees that look forward to low fills, because we don't really produce them anymore.
We don't have low fills anymore, which is, yeah, I'm sorry. Sorry to all of you employees. On the occasional low fill day, we'll let you know.
Yes. Which is very rare now.
Yeah, it's pretty fun.
So on a day-to-day basis, how are you communicating to your team to keep up the proficiency of these goals? Because you can, when you're talking about 365 days of production,
mm-hmm.
it can be very easy to slip up.
Oh yeah.
So what is the most important thing that you've seen within the guys that and gals within the back to keep them mindful of what they're doing?
Yeah, I think that honestly, it's kind of integrated into our conversations as production workers fairly seamlessly, because every week we're talking about how we need to split up these packaging runs and how many cases and how many kegs we need. So therefore we're looking at the overall volume of the tank together, and we're looking at that, and we all know we want to hit a particular volume. If we're looking at a 10-barrel packaging tank, we want that to be at 10. And so as we talk about that and go into that and look at that number, it continually facilitates the conversation while we're not even brewing at that point. Okay, so this is at 7 barrels. Why is that at 7 barrels? What did we do, and what do we need to do differently to achieve our goal? And that's, again, not even on a brew day. We're not even talking about the recipe, but it goes back upstream to the decision making made on the brew day or whenever. And so even on moments outside of talking directly about efficiencies, we're still evaluating how that's going. So it's interesting to see that, and then see all of our faces as we oh man, yeah, this thing happened. It was a one-time thing. But this is what the thing was, and we know what it was so that we can change it and fix it. Or while we're doing a transfer transferring beer from a fermentation vessel to bright tank, we like each other, so we're all walking back and saying hi and hey, what are you doing? I've got 5 minutes between my timers. What's up, man? And so, if somebody's doing a transfer, we'll walk and be kind of all anticipating that we meet those numbers. And so those conversations are happening. throughout the week. And those experiences, at least this is how I see it, feed back into our conversations on brew day. Okay, we're low. We're making a 14 Plato beer. We're at 10 Plato. This is bad. Why are we at 10 Plato? We're going to need to table that and then figure that problem out and then get us to our Plato. And everybody is on the same page of what that needs to look like. And so it's fun to see how conversations on non-brew days seamlessly interface with conversations and decision making on the brew day.
Sweet. Right on. Well, any last words? We've got about 2 or 3 minutes left. What keeps you excited, and what kind of what things are you excited about this year within our brewery space?
I love so much. Beer's so cool. Beer is an endless journey of discovery, and so that's fun at every level. But even making and engineering and orchestrating this product and making it good every time is that's really cool. But I'm freaking stoked about this pale ale. That's gonna be awesome. I love. We've got a solid production team. We've got solid brewers, and I get excited when they get excited about their recipes. And so I'm looking forward to our brewers getting a little more action on writing recipes and releasing those. And what else am I looking forward to? St. Patrick's Day is just so freaking cool. I can't wait to
I'm
drink.
glad that it's very close.
It's so soon. Copious amounts of Irish Red. That's fun. But I think those things, the excitement of designing a beer and then putting it into somebody's glass and getting to sit with somebody, and beer's such a funny thing. It just, in my experience, draws you into, or at least facilitates the opportunity for a conversation that is just a wonderful experience between people. When we talk about being crafted for community, Cabin Boys is crafted for community, but beer itself is a facilitator of that and has been for generations. And so it's fun to be a part of that journey.
Arguably 10,000 years.
yeah. Many generations. So that, and I always can't wait to write my own next recipe. Like, yep. That's just part of being a brewer. Every brewer can't wait to write their own next recipe.
Right on. Well, thank you so much for coming on. I'm glad that I was able to just kind of force you into sitting in a room and talking. This wasn't as hard as you I think that you would thought that it was going to be.
Yeah, you're right. I joked with my wife on the phone recently that anytime I have a new thought, like I want to go get a PhD in that, you can have a conversation without getting a PhD.
That's true.
Thank you for having me.
Very, very true. Yeah, you're very welcome. Well, I'm Austin McElroy. This is Kettle Additions. If you like what we're doing, please like, subscribe, rate the podcast, and tell your friends. It's the only way that it keeps it going, and keep us telling stories and fun facts about how to keep a brewery brewing. So cheers. I'll see you next week. Bye.